just, diverse, and green. In one sentence, I would say the biggest issue facing cities today is probably rooted in equity and justice. And how are we hearing different voices? How are we having democratic input into decisions? And how are some of the tectonic plates of our structures, like transit or housing planning, taking into account the rectification of some of the opposite pressures we have that come from things like capitalism and those sorts of things. So how are we counterbalancing some of the injustices that we have in our present system, and cities are a place to do that. How do we bring values to urban planning? Values around people and also values around the environment or sustainability. As an example of an initiative that's making cities flourish, I'm going to give you what's actually a fairly old example, but I still think it's a really compelling one. So here in Toronto, some people will remember that in 2006, we had this summer with a lot of gun violence. It was deemed the summer of the gun, and I believe we've had other summers since then that got called the same thing. But in that summer, I was working at the Toronto Foundation, which is the local community foundation, and we really felt this desire to step up and do something. And rather than sort of pull the usual levers we might pull, like a grant program, we wondered whether there was something more systemic and more, into imagining what a scaled up answer to the root causes of this problem were. And so we did some convening of leadership, and we came to, I think, a fairly not unexpected conclusion that one of the roots of this was around joblessness and unemployment amongst young people, particularly in some parts of our city. And so we launched an initiative with partners that would provide young people, at this time, I believe this initiative, which still exists now, is now citywide, but it was neighborhood focused at that time, an opportunity to get training to become swimming and sport coaches. So become a lifeguard, become a swimming coach, become a soccer coach, a basketball coach. In the initial years, that was the range. But then really importantly, we actually built the relationships back to the city of Toronto and to some of the major summer camp programs that do a lot of hiring of young people, in the spring for summer programs. I don't remember doing specific data, but we sort of assumed that there was probably a disconnect between who most needed those jobs and who was getting them, and there were two missing pieces. One was about training, and one was about just being in the room to have the job interview. And so we quite intentionally created those connections. Again, a lot of what I've heard at the summit has been about, well, what's just missing is the capacity to make the connection around risk, around funding, around capital. And so we intentionally made those connections and, took young people right through from, here's your opportunity to get the certification to be the soccer coach, with things like TTC tickets and childcare and whatever was needed, through to here's how to actually apply for that City of Toronto soccer coach job that pays better than most summer jobs available to high school students, and a bit of mentorship around that. And so that's a really little program, and it's not a new program, but it's one that I think has some really interesting elements. It identifies the underlying issues between what's being experienced as an acute problem. It had a lot of leadership from different organizations around it, so insights into what would work and what wouldn't. But it also understood that, sometimes a mix of things is needed. So there was as I said, a training component, a connecting component, a mentoring component. And I think, even though it's small, that's an example of the kinds of initiatives that really make a difference.